Hello everyone. I'm so grateful that you've come to this symposium. This is a very important topic. We're basically considering the survival of human civilization. And we need to understand that this has to be a profound and nuanced conversation. And we have some wonderful guests with us here on the first Symposium from the Ecosystem Restoration Camps movement in 2021. As a journalist and then as an ecological researcher over the last, 40 years of my life, and even earlier as a young person going around the world, I have observed that the cradles of civilization are mostly desertified. And when you understand the process that human beings over historical time have reduced the biodiversity, reduced the biomass, and reduced the accumulation of organic matter, and that this is a reversal of evolutionary succession. Many of the problems that we're facing are not mysterious, they're the result of these particular activities. Our impact is based on our understanding of the systems. If we don't understand and we don't value the role of biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter, and we think that extracting things and manufacturing things and buying and selling things are the basis of wealth, we're incentivizing the behaviors that destroy ecological function. This problem is really a myriad of problems together. One of these is ecological. You can see that when you reduce the biodiversity, the biomass, and the accumulated organic matter, landscapes become drier. The soil becomes less fertile. And it's less beautiful, less functional. But this is not the only problem. This leads to scarcity. And in scarcity, you have competition for scarce resources. So this is the basis of many of the conflicts that we see around the world. We've also created this concept that scarcity is the basis of wealth. And so we have people competing for the material, and so this causes differentiation and stratification of the economy. So you have some people who are magnificently rich, unbelievably rich. And then you have these people who are billions of people who are desperately poor. So we're creating a billionaire class for a tiny minority and a vast number of desperately poor people. And we have to consider, is that okay? Is that a way forward for human civilization? And we have other problems that cascade from this. So it's an ecological problem, it's a security problem, it's an economic problem, and it's a psychological problem for individuals, and it's a psychological problem for society. So many of the people who are massively wealthy are miserable. They're not the happiest people on the earth. They're people who are clutching their material possessions and losing their souls. And often you see the poorest people are the happiest people and the most generous and kind. And you see people who are super wealthy and they don't really notice how other people are suffering. They're considering themselves. And the society then is divided. Instead of everybody realizing that we're all related to one another, and not only related to one another, but related to all life, the consideration is what's best for the individual and how can they differentiate themselves from each other rather than how can we all come together. And so now we're at a point where ecologically We have the cryosphere melting. We have ocean acidification and thermal expansion in the oceans as the oceans heat up. We have climate changes. We have changes in surface temperatures, which are moving the moisture into the upper atmosphere rather than maintaining it in the lower hydrological cycle. We have the loss of soil fertility, the loss of productivity. We have toxicity in vast areas. We've released persistent organic pollutants where the highest concentration of these poisons are in Inuit populations in the northern parts of the world, far, thousands of miles from any point source of pollution. We're causing this pollution to go everywhere. We have huge amounts of cancer and other problems. And we have to ask ourselves, and I started to ask myself, is this an inevitability? Is this the best we can do? And the answer is certainly no. And I've seen that it's possible to rehabilitate large-scale damaged ecosystems. If we can restore ecological function to broad areas of the earth, and maybe to all of the earth, why don't we do that? That's what we need to do. And in order to do that, we need everybody to participate. We need to understand this as a species and act together as a species on a planetary scale. If we can do this, then our effect is enormous. Our effect at degradation has been enormous. If we change our intention from going shopping to restoring the earth, our impact will be enormous. We have the power to do that. And we have to choose that. That has to be the central intention of human civilization going forward, because the problem is so enormous. We can't spend years and decades more in selfishness and greed and ignorance. We have to learn from what we have seen. Our scientific evidence is enormous now, that human impact on all the various systems is clear. We can see that the organic layer, respiration, the height of the canopy, the total amounts and the percentages of biomass and respiration around the world are what's regulating the hydrology, the weather, and the climate. And that's creating the soil fertility, the habitat for microbial and fungal communities, which are releasing geologic materials for availability to biological life. This is the synthesis of what our science is telling us. And it's not so complex that we all can't understand it. And we all have a role to play in making sure that we come back to a type of dynamic equilibrium at a higher state. So we have forced the ecology, the earth systems, to seek equilibrium at a degraded state. That's very dangerous for us. That's where you have extinctions. And when you have extinctions, the top of the food chain is the most at risk. We're the top of the food chain. So we need to process this quickly, because this is determining the quality of our lives, but more importantly, it's also determining the future for our children and for future generations of life. Thanks very much for listening to me. I hope that you'll keep participating in this conversation, and that you'll consider coming into the community in the ecosystem restoration camps movement around the world, where ordinary people are participating in restoring the earth. Thanks again.